So AURORA is one of the products of these efforts with partner organizations and focusing specifically on selection of indicators for monitoring restoration. So I have just very briefly some background on monitoring specifically for restoration. So we consider this a very comprehensive process that includes the systematic collection, analysis, and dissemination of the data. And it's also an important part of a well-balanced restoration implementation strategy. So we have a way to check the success of our restoration. So why we find that monitor forest and landscape restoration is important in our projects. So the monitoring allows us to guide the project implementation through continuous learning. We ensure the transparency and provide evidence of progress, results, and the impacts. We communicate the positive results. We provide an evidence to those who have invested in restoration. And also we have this support for regular reporting on progress towards meeting any restoration commitments that are now very important. So a monitoring framework for restoration should include a set of indicators that is as small as possible according to our objectives. So we don't want to finalize with a huge set of indicators that we are not able or capable of measuring. These indicators have to be as well simple and easy to measure, enough to track the changes and develop with attention to cost effectiveness. Again, in terms of project implementation, sometimes then we end up not having enough budget to monitor the results. And the framework should include biophysical, social, economic, and governance measures as well, and take into account multiple timescales, be designed and implemented in a participatory way, and integrate different types of data and information. So we know that countries have committed millions of hectares to be restored by 2030. Now these commitments become even more relevant in the context of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. But how are we going to be tracking the progress of these commitments? And as there is no single solution for all the situations, FAO and partners have developed, or we are still developing, some tools that can help us throughout the restoration projects, from the planning to monitoring and then also the reporting. So today that we're focusing on AURORA, that CAT-PUGMIL and MASA have supported, AURORA is part of these planning tools, and it serves to identify the indicators for monitoring. And we can, at the end, I mean, I'm not going to get into all these tools. All of them are, except for AURORA, that is jointly developed by WRI and FAO. The rest are all FAO-based tools. And I will talk a bit briefly after about the FIRM, that is the reporting tool for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So when we think about monitoring restoration, we have to answer ourselves several key questions, like what are the land uses present in our landscape and the local conditions, which drivers of degradation or barriers to the sustainability are affecting the landscape, and that could also be a problem for our restoration efforts. What are the objectives and targets of the restoration? Which indicators we will be measuring, considering the constraints in terms of what can be done with the resources we have, and report and make the information available for future decision-making and adaptive management. So before jumping specifically to AURORA, I just want to give you a very brief context of the tool. So we started the work already some years ago on the selection of indicators through the publication, The Road to Restoration, that was published in 2019, following a drylands and forest and landscape restoration monitoring week in 2016. So during that week, more than 60 participants endorsed a roadmap that included an activity stream specifically dedicated to the development of a guidance document on indicators for restoration. Then we published that in French and in Spanish in 2020, and the guide aims to support the users through a decision-making process in 7 different stages, starting with the determination of the objectives, the land use and the barriers present at the landscape to be restored, filtering the indicators according to the constraints, priorities, and data availability, and finally setting up the system on the basis of the indicators and metrics. And then we have the optional part that is building a restoration index. So what you can see here is an example of a list of the indicators provided in the guide. And this case is mapping indicators corresponding to the international frameworks that you have here on the right. So AURORA stands for Assessment, Understanding and Reporting of Restoration Actions, and it is what we call an interactive version of that publication that I just mentioned, the Road to Restoration. So we launched the application in June in 2022, I think, or no, last year. And it allows the users to easily think about and select the indicators to measure the restoration efforts against their objectives. So the tool aims to help the stakeholders develop a monitoring system tailored to their needs by identifying the indicators and measures to track progress towards their set objectives. AURORA guides the users through basic questions about the land restoration process. Why we need restoration in the first place, what will the restored land be used for, what are the obstacles that could prevent the sustainability, so both degradation and favorable factors, and what are the constraints and priorities for the monitoring of the restoration. Here we have all the steps that we go through on the app. And as I mentioned a few slides ago, is following more or less a similar logic as in the publication, The Road to Restoration. So first we will have to identify which land uses are present in our landscape. Then what are the drivers of the drivers of degradation are acting as barriers to the sustainability, what our restoration objectives are, which indicators we will be using, what are the constraints to measure those selected indicators, and then we would need to set up a baseline and targets for the selected indicators. And finally, we will be able to visualize the progress based on an index. So here with the land uses, we can select one or all of the land uses provided. Here, it's just like we have just the 6 overall land uses provided by the IPCC that actually Sophie already mentioned them. In the next step, we will be selecting the objectives of our restoration project. So we use what we've called the restoration wheel, and has the goal themes in the outer part of the wheel, and then the sub-themes in the inner part. Once we have gone through that thinking process of what our restoration goals are and which drivers of degradation we have in the landscape, we're able to select the indicators to measure the restoration from predefined lists. And those lists are coming from what we've selected on our land uses and our objectives. But then we can also add customized indicators. We also reviewed all the soil-related indicators, so to make sure that they were aligned with the Cat pour Mille initiative as well. And yeah, like any person can add any customized indicators and then track the progress if they happen not to be here. So for each indicator from the list that we select, we would have to think about how easy it is to collect it, if it is affordable, if the data to measure it are available, what the quality of the data is, and if it's comprehensive and if it's sensitive. We have guidance for filling all these parts of the app on the web. I will now show you, I will show you after on the website. And again, this is just a brainstorming process to help us select the best and most appropriate indicators to our project. So on this stage, we would have to enter a baseline value. So we have a baseline or the current situation, and then we can just set our targets to track afterwards. So at the end of the process, we will have a list of the indicators selected, and we can then actually be able to track the progress through an index that tell us how the overall restoration progress is doing. There's one, this side here, we can also set up a bit of how important those indicators are, depending on if we really think that they will make a huge difference or not. And also that gives weight to each of the indicators, and then that way the index is calculated. This is just an example that I have here. And the idea of having that index is just to measure the progress in a more integrated way. And that comes from the sustainability index developed with the government of El Salvador, who developed this index together with AURORA to measure different aspects of the landscape, but having an overall idea on what that looks like in terms of success of the restoration. So what was the roadmap followed to set this index? They identified priority landscapes, the stakeholders involved in the management, and this is a key part for the restoration to be successful as well. So they identify the impacts and define the goals and baselines, leading to choose which components that this will be like the overall goals of the restoration project to be included in the index. And then they just, as I mentioned, give weight to each of them depending on availability and also importance that we give to those indices. So this all this exercise or process provides a flexible support for strategic planning and allows the users to build a monitoring framework and consequently to design a monitoring system for the restoration projects. So it's really flexible and in the sense as well of that we can always go back and adjust our indicators, but also our targets. And yeah, this is just to finish that this been like a huge collaborative work, especially with AURORA, but also with a lot of support from different funders. And I'm just going to give you a very quick run of the tool, and to give you specifically as well what we've been doing with the funds received from MASA. So first of all, we have this option to have a session open that allows the user save their restoration projects, and that can be accessed through any device, because before everything was being stored in the cache of the browser. So if you moved a computer, then you wouldn't be able to find that that project, so you would have to restart over. So now we have this option that was done as part of this French-funded project. We also have different languages available. So for this, we have Spanish and French because we have a lot of contributions from the Initiative 2020. So the Spanish and Portuguese were something very important to them as well. So I can just give you the little tour in French. We have here just very quickly all the names of the projects that we've been using.
As the video might be listened by people that are not speaking French, you cannot limit to the French. I understand that it is in French, but you can use the English too.
Yeah, I can. It was just like to see that we have like both languages. I will skip. I will still skip speaking English anyway. So yeah, and here we can have just a summary of what those projects are. So we have the number of indicators by objective, by land use, by constraints. So we have the number of the indicators, but also the value of the indicators, of the indices, sorry. And then also the language in which that project has been developed. So yeah, I have like this, for instance, like from the Mediterranean region. Here we can edit, we can delete, or we can copy the project so we don't have to restart over. So as I said here, like we will go through all these steps. I'm going to go quickly because we are like a bit maybe, I don't know how much time I already used, but we
You're
go
about half, a little bit more than half.
Okay. So we like here, just for this example, I just selected because this is like the most common Mediterranean landscape we have. So forest, agriculture, and grasslands. I'm not going to select all of them because then also the selection of the indicators becomes really a burden because we have like a lot of indicators to choose from. And as I said, it's always better to have a reduced number so we can actually conduct the monitoring. In every step, we have one information tab on the left that is an explanation of what each of the land uses are, for instance, and depending on the step, we have a different type of information. So here, if we continue, then we will have to select the constraints, or not the constraints, the barriers of sustainability or drivers of degradation. So for the Mediterranean, I just selected human population, mines, and also wildfires. And then for the objectives here, we decided, this was the example for the Mediterranean, that we wanted to have really a focus on food and products, and also benefits for the population. I mean, we could have obviously biodiversity, energy, we have everything on soils here. If we continue like this, then we will have here the three main groups of indicators. So we can add an indicator from the pre-selected list. So based on the objectives, the land and the objectives and the drivers of degradation. So we have like also divided by the categories. So we can, I'm just going to select one of each because if not, it's going to be super long. Then we have a separate one for the land uses. We have these that are generic, that are not specific for each land use, because these that are NDVI or hectares, like depending diversity of species, those apply to all of the land uses. So we can select, for instance, NDVI and then increase the forest area, for example. And then the personalized ones that you can just select whatever you want, add a unit, and then I'm not going to add any of those, but that could be always an option. And then here, this is, again, the brainstorming process that I mentioned, that we have to really think about how easy it is to collect the data, if we can really afford the collection of that data. So here, again, we can, in the evaluation criteria, we have all those options, and also the definition, because sometimes, yeah, it's a bit difficult to get the head around it, but we can just, this is for, if I say, okay, this is very accessible and very available, I'm just going to do a bit of random thing, because then this will influence, if we go then to the, so here we all have a lot of indicators to select. Maybe I have to go to one. Anyway, I'm going to do it quickly. So this obviously this takes a lot of time to do. So this, just to give you an example, we have from Bolivia an actual exercise of one province using Aurora to really build their monitoring framework, but obviously like this data, you have to collect the baseline data and then you have to set up your targets. So this is obviously just for the purpose of just showing, but so I'm just putting this, we have always the action augment or increase or reduce or maintain. So this also gives you a little error message if you are trying to increase the forest land, but you have numbers that are not actually increasing, and it will give you an error message so you cannot continue. So I'm just going to do very, very quickly. Okay. So this would be the final table of the indicators that we can download in an Excel file. And these little lights that we have is just a traffic light thing. So here, because I put everything randomly, but these are green, yellow, and red, depending on the constraints that we have selected. So if we see that there are like some indicators that are really easy to measure and very cost efficient, we will have a green light. And then we can maybe, if we have a very long list of indicators, we can maybe discard the ones that are coming with a red light. So it's just for decision-making process. And then here we can also change the entry point. So for instance, if we want to see which indicators of the ones we selected are aligned with the United Nations conventions, we can just click here and then we see to which SDGs or Aichi targets are corresponding to. And then this would be the last part of all of them. That would be the monitoring, the actual monitoring, because the other part is the planning and the selection of indicators. And here we can select, for instance, after 1-2 years, which percentage of our target we have completed. So maybe we can say, okay, we arrived to what we wanted. We are half here. We are more or less here. And this way we will have like an idea of our index if overall we are having a good success with our restoration progress. Then another thing that I wanted just to quickly show you is that we are now in the process of updating a bit the website. This is just the one that is not published yet, because we are integrating the selection of the indicators into the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring platform that I just mentioned, the FIRM, that is going to be, it is already the reporting tool for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So users with the FIRM, they can register their restoration initiatives, and then they are directed to Aurora to select their indicators from here, and the other way around. So if you do all your process through Aurora to select your indicators, then you will have a little note saying, do you want to report on these indicators for the UN Decade on Restoration? And then we will have that option there as well. So we are working on that. This is still, like a beta version that is not published, but we are adding some things and the link to the firm directly. And then just to finish, I forgot that also with the project, we had as well under the objectives to create a user manual, and we have both in English and French that is already published. So you can access it directly from resources, and both in English and French. That is already available for everyone. And that's all.